Welcome to the Accountable Intelligence Podcast.
Alrighty, welcome back to Accountable Intelligence. And today we're going to be talking a little bit more about some current events in the AI landscape. And then, of course, we're also going to be talking about some of the environmental impacts specifically as we've seen them so far in data center development. So a lot of the impacts from AI are really side effects. And the ecological impact is one of those side effects. And there are some pretty significant numbers that we'll talk through today. And then maybe round up by maybe some state-specific items for where we're seeing how we're seeing AI combated in our local environments, and then secondly, what are some of the things to be on the lookout for, and maybe even some tips for what you could do locally for slowing down AI until we kind of understand AI in your community. So, well, first off, we were talking about some of the recent events in AI. So, data center expansions are still, I mean, moving it forward at a scale that just is unprecedented. It's not really before seen. So I think most of your data center expansion now is really AI data center. So like your existing data center from like cloud work, for example, those expansions slowed down to kind of almost a steady state, growing at the rate of, like, we'll say, population expansion. However, the AI data center pieces are expanding exponentially. So I mean, they're expecting almost double, I think, by 2030 number of AI data centers that are out there, which is crazy.
Sounds about right.
So yeah, and one of the things that strikes me about that is that much of the expansion is done still without really advances in technology that allow us to control the energy, water, and infrastructure consumption. So one of the first things that I was reading about from the ecological or environmental impact is the water consumption. Water, general data center. So this is a standard size, and another thing that's changing in the AI data center implementation is they're going from like a regular IT size data center with its own usage patterns, and they're expanding that out to maybe double and triple that and quadruple that because they want to do it like all in one deployment where they can actually really expand the compute, what, times 10 in a single data center, for example. But a standard data center, sorry, I got off sidetracked there, but a standard data center uses 5 million gallons of water a day, which is crazy. Generally about the same size as 100. So equivalent would be a data center when you deployed it, it's going to use the same amount of water as about 100,000 person town, which is wild.
Mm.
So I'm in Texas, Sean's in Virginia. What are you seeing in Virginia, Sean? Where from an expansion perspective, is it in local news much, or like what are some of the things you've heard?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think I saw the statistics. I just looked it up the other day. Northern Virginia, specifically, focused in Loudoun County. I think they said they have 70% of all of the global internet traffic. So 500, five or
That's crazy.
600 data centers, present day. So yeah, I think the concern is obviously there, on, the energy and, water demands that has, and, that trickles down to consumers. So there's a lot of concern there. I did see where, there's been a pushback from some of the local community. Like I think there was 25 projects that were canceled in 2025. Of course, though, when you already have 500 or 600 data centers there, obviously there's a lot of existing issues and things like that. So we are seeing it. I've seen some projects in PG County, where it's rural, but close enough to the population where people were like, "Hey, wait a minute, what are we doing here?" And that's just across the bridge in Maryland. So I think it's on everyone's mind. I'm not sure how much though. I mean, the DMV is very heavily populated. It's a very politicized region, and
Yeah.
when you throw those factors in, there's a lot of gray area how all these things play out. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
so
for
yeah,
sure.
I do think there's a increased concern. I live in Alexandria, Virginia myself, and we've seen there's an Amazon data center that is a few miles from my home. You can on certain nights you can hear the whir, like that low level whirring sound that comes from the
It's
data center.
crazy.
So there's been, we've seen an uptick in my specific neighborhood where people are really concerned about what's going on and everything like that. So yeah, man, we're in it here, man. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's wild. And it's interesting because I'm in a relatively rural area. You're in a not so rural area, so I can't imagine that the land costs are cheap. So they're probably paying a premium for the land. Are they building like essentially right in the middle of a town, or how's that working in North
Right on the
Virginia?
outskirts. I mean, yeah,
Mhm.
like I said, it's enough where I can hear it. And on my I've got the whole Ring app, and everybody's networked in one way, shape, or form. So
Yeah.
I'll see on there where people are complaining about even the lighting and things like that. So yeah, it's close enough. Let's say that.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and I think that's wild. So I guess probably the different use cases would be, as you mentioned, that so much internet traffic, so much compute and other infrastructure there in Northern Virginia. So that's a big draw. Whereas we have the kind of the opposite draw, where so that you're in the middle of nowhere. You basically have just a bunch of fields around, so you can kind of put stuff where you'd like it, but then you're trekking for infrastructure. So wild to see the two places probably the most heavily impacted for those regions is like
Yeah.
remoteness and then proximity.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna
electricity
ask
wise,
you.
so
I got
I
a
don't,
silly
some
question for you,
good.
man. I got a
Yeah,
really silly question. What is the in your just in your opinion, two guys sitting around talking,
yeah,
what is the purpose of the increase in these data centers? Why like, I just said there's 500 to 600 right now.
yeah,
Projects are going on, expansion across all types of places. You mentioned you're in Texas. I've seen some in the Bible Belt. A lot of incentivized projects and things like that where companies are getting tax breaks. Is there really that much need for expansion of all the data centers? Just your opinion. I know there's probably some number crunching
yeah.
and data behind that, but what's the thought there?
I think there are a couple reasons, and I think the primary ones are not going to be because there's a like an imminent need, and just from our perspective, like for people or to expand to solve some humanitarian problem. So I think in my opinion, I'll say top three. I think that the number one thing is just simply competitive because you already mentioned. So you got an Amazon data center. So Amazon's running one that wanting to run their AI on their data centers. Same thing with XAI or Grok. And then you have already the leaders of like OpenAI and Anthropic. And each of these folks have to they have to control the compute, storage, and of course the back end electricity and water because they can't allow that to be done by a competitor because the cost won't pencil out. So I think that's probably the primary piece is that they've got to expand their own company's infrastructure and compute, or they can't compete. So I think that's probably the first one. The second one, I think the reason we hear a lot, especially in defense industries, is oh we got to compete with China. So the speed at which they're able to expand, kind of get essentially skip regulation. I think a lot of that comes because of the maybe the near peer urgency is what they would call it because China does have maybe more some more maturity in AI in some of these areas. But I also think that thirdly, from the AI problem, it's I'm not super impressed with the science behind AI or the expansion. There's certainly like the convolutional neural network piece of that is valid. There's a lot of value in how that's done and why that has allowed us to get agents that look more like or look and sound more like humans, right? But
Yeah.
in reality, they have to have compute to make it smarter.
Yeah. Got it.
So their goal is we essentially make the world a data center so we can have one massive brain that will hopefully be as smart as kind of a human in creativity. So it's not that it's almost like a dumbness problem for the AI models is that they're not making those models smarter and more efficient. They're saying, okay, we've got to just throw compute at this thing until we get some of the results that we need.
Right. So all of this is to get to that, like you said, that one general intelligence for AI. We're doing all this just to
That's
get
right.
there with no idea of what that'll even mean, other than Elon says that it'll make it so that nobody has to do work.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
I mean, I don't know. Like, so Elon, I mean, we've talked about some of his, like, how much do we trust what he's saying? Hey, we're going to hand out universal basic income. I don't believe it, but that's what he's saying. But then there's also, like, to me, so at least Elon, I feel like, is expressing the risks. He's saying, like, this is as risky as the nuclear weapons of old, right? So that's good. At least he's aware and making that public. Whereas Altman on the other end from OpenAI, he's more of a like, guys, don't worry about it. There's no risk here. They just keep firing their safety people. So it's definitely interesting to see. Like, you can't trust them.
Yeah, it is. And so let me add on to that. So Elon, think about AI. Think about the
Hmm.
example you just talked about here. And by the way, I'm not an Elon Musk fan, but I'm also not just blaming. This is not a let's trash Elon bit
Yeah,
here. So the you just talked about how you have to have more data and more compute to actualize AI. It make models smarter, move
yep,
AI towards being as human-like as possible, artificial general intelligence. Elon, just through Tesla and his data, they have, one of the largest commercially owned corpuses of data. I don't know if that's the right way of saying it. They
yeah,
have it. Sam Altman and OpenAI don't have that. Right? They're trying to build that. That's the difference in their business models. Like Elon has a boatload of data to go through. So when I and I'm sort of thinking about this from a 30,000-foot view. When I look at their actions, like Elon is saying, sounding the alarm, but but his business model also says, yeah, but I'm still going to profit off of this, everything.
that's right.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
he's moving, he's lobbying for space data centers. He's got companies that are around how do we move equipment to space. He's not doing that for
yeah,
the betterment of the people. He's doing that for profit.
yeah,
So it's like, yeah, I'm gonna sound all these alarms and have these check boxes over here so I don't look like the bad guy, but I'm still gonna continue on capitalizing off these things. Yeah,
yeah.
it's just hard for me to look at that in any positive light. And when you say he's sounding the alarm, let's not forget he's one of the founding or donators for OpenAI, right?
Yeah. One of the other things is that he's the big proponent of the humanoid robot piece. Like, I think his vision is that 20 years he wants humanoid robots to be doing 80% of manual human tasks. So I mean, like you said, there's certainly, like, you can't say this is the greatest risk to humanity and be like, oh, by the way, like, my primary goal is to make robots that do everything that humans
Right.
do.
Yeah, and I mean, like show me the humanitarian side of Elon Musk. Like, you know,
Yeah.
when I hear guys like, that have his track record say that make statements like that, it's hard to believe those things. It's
Yeah.
hard. And again,
Well, I
not
think you can't
not
believe anyone who has a profit motive, right? I mean, forget whether it's Elon or Altman or the Anthropic guy. Like,
yeah.
when you're staring down billions, trillions potentially of dollars, can you be trusted to say, oh yeah, we're going to turn that down and we're actually going to do this other thing, right?
Yeah, or just tell everybody, hey, like, universally people won't have to work. Like, really? Okay, so then what?
Yeah.
Then what? Like,
Yeah.
it just it sounds ridiculous, man. So, we kind of got off the subject there, but the point, going back to
No.
the point here, is that, I wanted to I was just curious about, like, what is the purpose? What's the true need of all this stuff here? Like, what's the end game? And I mean, it just seems like, at the end of it all, it's to just, like we said, reach a point of
Yeah.
maturation with AI, um, without even knowing what that will truly do for everyone. You know?
Yes, exactly. And I think that's probably one of the initial triggers for us was, okay, we're speeding this up as fast as we can. We're gonna destroy landscapes. I mean, you talk about electricity, water, all these things. We're gonna potentially take apart the economy, and then you keep asking that for what question, and it's like just to get smarter. That's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to get okay. That's great. There's got to be a problem we're trying to solve. They didn't say like we're dedicating all this compute to cancer. It was we're just trying to
Right,
get
right,
smarter so we can tell it back to you.
right. Yeah, I don't know, man, and it's a very complex, or it just not even complex. Just you start to say like, am I, this doesn't make sense, or am I done? Like, am
Yeah,
I?
that's
Is there something I'm missing?
yeah.
So
I'm missing where we humans benefit out of this thing. That's the part. Yeah, you just keep looking for it. Keep digging around
yeah,
through the. And I think one of the that one of those documentaries that we've talked about on AI. There was was it DeepMind where they had actually tried to solve a DNA problem or a protein problem. I think, and I think
looking forward.
those are the types of things you hope like that's what you hope that folks are going to use the computer for. But by and large, no.
That's right. That's right. It's funny, man. As we, even as we sit here, I'm just like, okay, we are literally working towards trying to not have to think.
That's right. Yeah, you're exactly
Man,
right.
yeah, how lazy is that, man? Like, oh man. No, I know that's an exaggeration, but you know,
I don't think it is.
scary, man.
Let me ask you this question because I have an opinion on it. But so since you've gotten like access to a tool that's somewhat intelligent, like we'll say, what was the Chat GPT 4 that was actually a decent tool you could use? Do you feel like you
I mean,
find yourself
I mess
whether it's
around with all
attention
of them,
span?
man.
Yeah, yeah. Would you like from like an attention span and or like focus perspective? Like, have you seen an impact? No,
Yeah,
you don't think so?
it's worse because you're
Yeah,
yeah. For me, the attention span, my attention span is worse. Like, so now, like, I'll give. Is that what your question was? Or
that's
have
right.
you
Yeah,
seen
yeah,
it? It's almost like, have you seen an improvement in what you're able to do on a daily basis? Is that kind of
exactly.
where we're going with that?
Yes.
No, I think there has been some uh slight productivity increases, but I think that's a sliding scale because that's everyone, right?
Yeah.
Here's a very simple use case. I can use Copilot that has, that is aware of all of my email and all of my documentation in OneDrive or SharePoint, the repositories that I have in my business. And so I can ask Copilot questions to correlate, like, find this document for me, or what information, pull this information from this document so that I can put it in a proposal. Um, but so I theoretically it allows me to organize and reuse the data that I have um more. But all that means now is in you know now I'm having to go behind and make sure that what Copilot has done is true, clean data. So like,
Yeah.
instead of me writing something, now I spend the time going behind Copilot and making sure it doesn't sound like Copilot wrote something, or it pulled together two pieces of data that shouldn't be, and I've got something weird in there. So point being, I don't know how much more productive, maybe in volume by a little bit, but I'm still finding myself having to, I've just shifted where my priorities and my focuses are and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think that sometimes so like a proposal is probably a great example here because you have data and that's kind of like the agent job from a Copilot perspective. You say, hey Copilot, go find me some related documents that already exist that have like similar related terms. So that's probably a decent task. But then But then when it comes back to, okay, let's take this proposal piece and make it something unique. Like that's where it kind of breaks down, where you're not able to say anything different than what's already out there on the internet. I saw an interesting article yesterday from the Harvard, it may have been the day before yesterday. It was a Harvard study on essentially business advice that the agents were giving, and no matter the prompt or the question, all the agents, and they think they tested four of the leading models. They gave the basic exact same advice, regardless of the business idea and regardless of like the model and operating. Like, should it be a commoditization type business or should it be like very specific and differentiating type business? And I thought that was pretty interesting because it's really just what they call it was trend slop. It's a trend slop aggregator. So what is the trend on the internet? Bring that back and regurgitate it to me in for whatever for whatever question I'm asking, which is I thought it was kind of unique. But to your point, like okay, yes, it can summarize, but if it's not something that I need to summarize from what's out there, it's supposed to be a net new idea. There's no value there, and it's probably a net negative.
That's right, man. And again, these things are trained on human data. So,
Yeah,
it's not me and you can think and come up with nuanced ideas that are very unique. And
yeah,
that's I think that's the difference, man. Maybe that's the whole idea is that um at some point you'll get there with AI, but
yeah.
it's hard to
I think
see.
that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. What can AI discover that's not already out there? So there's a model released. I don't know if it's a specific model or just a
Mythos.
derivation of existing models. So Mythos piece, yes. So that was released in the application security, and we both work in cybersecurity space. There was a lot of terror, I'll say, because essentially it's an automated agent or tool, we'll call it, that can run against source code and chain together a series of activities to exploit vulnerabilities, whether it's in a company or whether it's in a program, like API, like things on the internet, whatever that is. So I'm trying to keep the language high level so we don't put everyone to sleep. But the key thing there is that it's able to say, okay, if I were to go investigate an organization that I wanted to attack, I could say, okay, let's go look at, we'll say NFL.com, since you're wearing the Commanders jersey. If I want to go look at NFL.com, and I can say, okay, I can run a recon activity, and try to tell me what servers are they running behind the scenes, what web technology are they using, and then I could say, okay, what are the vulnerabilities and versions of the systems that they have, and then what are the exploits that are available. So Mythos with just a simple prompt, I guess that what terrorized people is if you could say, okay, go hack NFL.com without any prior expertise, you could then run the tool. It'll go figure out what technology it's running, figure out the versions of that technology, find maybe initial reconnaissance exploits, maybe even try to phish somebody with an email or smish type technique, and then you then develop a custom exploit for that technology, deploy the exploit, and then at that point you now have so through a simple prompt exploited an entire environment. So obviously scary, right? Especially when you think about the fact that the tool can run 24 hours a day. That, like, you don't have to be sitting at the desk telling it what to do. And when we were doing some pen tests early on, and then of course even on the defense side, we would say the most dangerous attacker was like a high school kid, and primarily because they have unlimited time, right? They got nothing but time on their hands. If you make them mad, they can just spend their whole life just attacking you. And I think these agents represent like obviously a very intelligent version of that, where they have nothing but time and they can string together these exploits to attack systems. So huge terror in the cybersecurity community, especially for the leaders portion of this, because they're saying, okay, now I can have these automated agents that can exploit my environment. Which, that aside, certainly that's a risk, and that's being worked, we'll say, through another project called Glasswing. But I think one of the ramifications there is that and I'm trying to bring this back around to the general new knowledge versus just the summarization or trend slop engine, right? I think one of the ramifications there to me is that maybe open source dies. Like, open source software has been kind of one of the underpinnings of the internet for however long. But if we're going to deploy tools like this that can go find issues in publicly available source code, what does this do to open source software and their ability to actually publish code online? 'Cause I would never publish anything again. Like if I was a university, if I was an applied research organization, if I was an open source or software company, like a SaaS, I would basically say from this point forward, we're closed source. All of our research is behind a paywall that we're not allowing people to use. Because I mean, that's right now your only differentiating point from the AI thing is that it can summarize it and provide it back to other people, but it doesn't give you any value. And now the risk is huge from things like Mythos. Sorry for that long-winded ramble, but that to me is a huge takeaway from AI is that it's going to really de-incentivize information sharing.
Yeah, and that's a great point, man. And and just to add on to that, when I think about the idea that Mythos has been provided to 40 companies, the same players that we're talking about,
Yep.
under the guise of I'm assuming the idea there is that these are from a national perspective, these are the companies that are most poised to defend our national interests. But at the same time, they're for profit. It's perplexing, man. It's hard to understand. So going back to your point about open source, what I'm thinking about there is, even if you don't publish anything, can you truly keep anything unless you have a closed off network? If you're using anything in the cloud and Google or AWS have Mythos, does it even matter? Unless you're I mean, I don't know. Again, I'm
Yeah.
not the most technically astute person, but I would think that if you are relying on these people environment, does it even matter, um, if
That's a good
you're
point.
publishing something or not, unless you're just completely siloed from any sort of connectivity, doesn't matter.
Oh, you mean you don't trust it when they say if you opt out, they're not going to train on your data? Is that what you're saying?
That's a light way of putting it, man.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you because like again, if the people with access to the tools are still like, for example, I think Microsoft owns a big stake in OpenAI, and they're kind of linked together from an artificial intelligence success perspective. So, are they really going to be the ones who say, "Yeah, we're not going to use this for that specific thing, or we're not only going to provide this to these specific people"? But yeah, yeah, good point.
Mythos was released under the guise of like this. It's terrifying, the abilities of this tool, but we're still gonna give it to just 40 companies. Like,
That's right.
well, if we can do this, there's somebody else, our adversaries, whoever the adversaries are, are
Yeah.
doing it as well. I guess maybe that's the idea. But again, it goes back to kind of the crux of why we're even here now, man. At what point does morality trump nationalism, or uh
Yeah.
whatever angle you have to justify what it is that you're doing, you know.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I think even that idea from like the OpenAI perspective, they were a nonprofit until it financially made sense to not be a nonprofit, right?
There you go.
Okay, we'll hang on until we don't really want to be a nonprofit anymore.
There you go. Oh, again, these big players, how many of them do business with China?
Oh yeah, all of them. Yeah. Did you see that
So
big?
are
So
they,
the Microsoft
is there really a
Microsoft had
national
that
interest
FedRAMP authorization. Oh yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, you're exactly right.
there?
Yeah, what have they given to China from a leg up perspective that now we're having to pay them to help compete with China on, right?
Yeah, and is that like, I'm talking present day, like we are
Yeah,
some of the same people who say that China is our biggest threat do business in China.
yeah. There was a Microsoft thing recently where they were focused. GCC, so it's a government community cloud which is supposed to be restricted to U.S. only, and Microsoft was supposed to say, okay, only U.S. customers and only U.S. support can use this tool, right? Well, they've had for years, and this only came out because people were calling in help desk. So like you're a contractor and you're required to use this tool that's U.S. only. So you got to pay extra for it, pay all this extra money. Microsoft says yes, it's approved, and then you call support and you get someone in China who has access to your tenant. This literal example. So people raised this issue to Microsoft, raised this issue to the government. No one did anything about it, and yet so now it's coming out that there's a study recently published by I think it was the GAO, where they're saying that basically the auditors gave up and said, well, it's Microsoft, we can't do anything to them, so it's okay.
It's another fascinating one. You know, did you see where the Ford CEO, China has some amazing, they've got some cool automobiles, man. Let's just, it is what it is.
Especially electric.
Yeah, the EV, they're killing the EV market, man. So he import, one of the things that the automotive industry are allowed to do that the average person can do, they can import a car under the guise of research and development. Not average consumer would not be able to go get a BYD, which is, one of the major EV brands, or Xiaomi or one of those. But the Ford executive had this SUV imported so for under R&D purposes, and he straight up said, I didn't want to give the car up. It was unbelievable. Like, we're nowhere near. We're not. They're light years ahead of us. Like, going back to the Elon Musk, the robotic piece. They use their assembly lines. They're using robots, and they don't have. Let's say a component that has 73 individual pieces on our assembly line. That it'll be one component. So much faster to assemble, which means, you can make, I think they said they can make 1,000 cars in one day, which is way, way faster. So the point is, they can make cars faster and cheaper. So this is the Ford GM saying this. He didn't want to give the truck up. But so the next day I look in the news and he says, we should ban China from selling their cars in the U.S. Right? So he's admitting, hey, they're light years ahead of us, on one hand, but then turn around saying, but well, we should publicly ban them. And his reason is simply, it's going to kill our car industry. So I'm like, okay, I get that, have a sense of pride, nationalism, but these same people, what are you all doing for us? What are y'all doing? Like, what are we doing? Like, are you guys just making money? And, I only say that to say, I'm going back to the point of where I was saying that the same people who are justifying what they're doing, from a sense of, hey, this is what's better for the U.S., this whatever, they're doing business with the same people that they're saying are our number one competitor or enemy or what have you. So it's just weird, man. It's just very strange.
It is. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you get around some of those situations. I think it is funny how he went straight to lobbying. Like, he's like, okay, we can't beat him, we're gonna block him.
Right. We're gonna block him, man. Yeah. And again, like, that would be if they were cranking out vehicles that were cheap and quality, then it's an easy message to get behind. But if you're just saying that, but you're not off, but in the same token, you're not offering the consumer, anything that's affordable and quality, or somewhere in the stratosphere, that it's it just kind of doesn't make sense, man. I know there's a lot of nuance that goes into that and everything, but it's a couple of degrees the way I think all of this stuff kind of ties together, man.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it often boils down to a money problem. And I think I from both from a national security perspective, the data center piece, the fact that the battery pieces, a lot of the materials needed have to come from China. That's another huge. We'll call that a risk to AI itself, but yeah, certainly a limiting factor. And you remember the Huawei phones? Like, I mean, those were nice phones. There was a reason they took off and sold like crazy in the U.S. because they were cheap, they had good quality, and then
a lot of features.
pretty well. a couple key things that we talked about for AI previously that they didn't really have good numbers on this. One is the water usage. So energy consumption is one thing, but nearly everything that requires energy consumption has a heat cost to it. So that this applied to existing, we'll call them standard data centers, but it's even more true for AI data centers because of the types of chips they use and the cooling processes. So essentially, the plan for AI, so based on the 100% growth rate they're projecting for AI data centers, they're going to be the AI data centers themselves are anticipated to use as much energy as the country of India in like 5 years,
Wow.
which is crazy.
Wow. That
Just
is
for AI data centers, which,
insane.
like we were talking about, that we don't even know what the benefit is, but we're going to make them the top energy consumer in the world in a short time. And I
Yeah.
think I don't know if you remember this, but I think it was just a few short years ago, Sean, where like the grid was falling apart. There was no power. We couldn't figure out how we're gonna keep the lights on in the summertime. We had rolling blackouts. What happened to that? Like, where did that go?
Yeah, that's another one, man. I read and it I read that by either 2028, 2028 to 2030, let's say, even where I live present day, the grid won't be able to support all of the consumers' energy, and
That's
that
hilarious.
was some of that was attributed to EV. That's not even taking the data center trickle down into
It's
account,
funny.
man. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, go
Yeah.
figure.
So just we're just hurtling towards something that is just clearly not sustainable from an electricity perspective.
That's right, man. And again, the people who are making these decisions, you got to question, like, if we know that, somebody had to have informed them, or maybe not,
Yeah.
I mean, which would be even scarier. Uh,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, but
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like in researching this, there's now a lot of data. There are formal, peer-reviewed, like scientific research studies on what is the energy implication of AI, and it's drastic, right? There's no argument now, and I think that what we should or would expect to see is either one slowing down the builds of AI data centers, or two, you would see some significant innovation in how they use resources, and thus far, like neither has happened.
yeah, I hate to say it, man, but going back to China, I've seen, they like to, we say they like to borrow from us, but I think there's some things we could borrow from them as well, in terms of their technology with building data centers out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're probably using coal though. That's probably the. I do like my clean
Right.
air,
Have
so I
you
don't
read
know.
about some of the things they're doing, in just using the ocean?
I did see some of that, like for power. You mean like using the tide back and forth?
No, underwater data centers, man. You,
Oh yeah,
yeah, you got your water supply right there. A couple, I There's a couple other innovative things that allow them, just much more efficient with how they build them. But again, I guess the idea here is we're trying to build so many so fast, we're not thinking about innovation.
yeah,
An
yeah,
idea that
exactly.
we're trying to keep up or stay ahead or whatever it is. Um,
That's
so
right.
yeah, who knows, man? Maybe that's our next business line, man.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think going back to the growth perspective is it really is, and I think that's probably the main argument we're trying to make is not stopping AI, but there has to be a realistic expectation and a kind of continued understanding of an app, how we're going to use it, and then secondly, how we're going to secure it before we just start laying waste to all these different things. I read a stat that the global electricity demand prior to the AI explosion was around 3% a year. So electricity demand worldwide rises about 3% a year, and now they're expecting it to be something more like 25% to 30% over the next few years, and then exponentially more beyond that as these data centers come on, which is just phenomenal. Like to almost double your
Mm.
growth, well, to quadruple or 5 times your growth in that short of a time. I mean, there are significant infrastructure impacts.
Yeah, wow, man. Kicking the can down the road, man. That
That's
kicking
right.
the problem down the
I'm
road.
sure
That
our
is
power bills will go down though, right?
right. Hey, remember, we won't have to work. Don't worry about it. No worries.
Somebody else will pay. That's right. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was probably the water piece, because I think that, again, now there's data. You have peer-reviewed scientific papers out there that show how much water these things use, and I think especially in Texas, water shortages are kind of widespread. They talk a lot about. I think Flatland Calvary even has a song talking about till the water table falls below the reach of humankind. But data centers might be the thing that pushes the water table below the reach of humankind, because we're talking about like 5 million gallons a day. We're talking about the same amount of water as 100,000. I mean, think about if tomorrow 100,000 person city popped up in your backyard and started competing with you for the same resources that your city uses. You'd be like, wait a minute, like we can't. First of all, they don't even have a high school football team to hate, but you'd have a lot more trepidation if all these, like if the population exploded with that level of infrastructure demand. But the data centers are doing the same thing, and they're just not the people part of it, right? So they have all the same needs and more. Yeah, the significant water and energy demands, but yet it's because it's closed off. You don't have access to the projects. It's not front of mind. So
I think we hit on a lot of things here today, man. Just as a dad and a citizen and just a good person, I think we're at the point where this is as important as anything to take on head on and start looking in the mirror first and figuring out, being honest and saying, hey, we have to address this. We have to address this problem, man. Gotta
that's right.
look at it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's everyone's responsibility.
Yep, for sure.